George Janko calling out Logan Paul has been met with surprise by some people, no surprise by other people. But the most surprising part to me from some people is that Logan Paul responded to this, a point-by-point breakdown. He woke up and apparently decided to put this up. There's a couple of responses by George. I didn't quite catch all of them. It was Mother's Day, so I didn't get a chance to engage, but he put some stuff up, took it down. And so I figured we'd look at it together. Spoiler alert, he misses the massive elephant in the room with this response. My heart ultimately is for them to surrender it all, walk with Jesus all the way, specifically Logan. I think that'll be amazing. But I think this will lead to a conversation because I think George really put out a lot of the business out there that I don't think people were familiar with, which just sounded pretty crazy. So Logan decided to specifically speak on a couple things that George said. So again, hide your kids, hide your wife, might be some profanity in this.
Because we're not making money on the show, and I'm getting pushed out.
You made money on the show.
I can show you my books. I was spending 10 G's a month being on the show.
All right, let's talk about this. Obviously, I wasn't on the podcast to represent myself, so I'd like to clarify a few things that were said. As well as having his own credit card, all expenses related to the show were paid for, including all travel and lodging. Obviously, George's total reimbursement came out to $20,000, 317 cents. I'd love to see any books that show otherwise. Spending $120,000 a year to be on a show is a little confusing.
This is a guy who's sending a screenshot.
Logan reveals apparently George had a credit card to be on the show for travel stuff. I'm not sure how and what he was spending $10K a month for. Maybe George doesn't live in LA anymore. Maybe they're on other sides of the coast. Maybe there was some stuff that he didn't submit to reimbursements. Maybe this is when the show wasn't doing as well and he was taking an L. I don't know. So I'm sure there's some timeline issues. Okay, that's not the elephant in the room though.
Of $11 million a week that he's making.
This statement is so crazy that it's almost laughable. That would mean I'm making $572 million a year. I'm nowhere near that. What happened was Prime had a very successful month. I think we did like 60 to 70 million, and I sent it to our group chat because I was proud of the business. I was stoked to show the boys, and I think George maybe misinterpreted that as like my personal income.
Here, I think Logan is not reading the room. There's a degree of discretion sometimes you want to have where if your income is like substantially bigger than the other people on your team's income, you may not want to flex with what the business did, right? So if he said Prime did 11 million, and I'm not sure if that's what his cut was or what the business did, but either way, I could see how that could be confusing if things are tight and you're flexing that you did 11 million or Prime or your company did 11 million, and perhaps you're not providing the context. So I'm not sure if he's saying the company did 11 million that week or if his percentage of it was an outlier week. Either way, it's just a weird thing to kind of like flex when you're not, or if you're in a completely different tax bracket than your co-host in a group text.
We weren't getting paid. I was getting paid $5,000 a month.
But you did make a sizable amount of money on the show.
And by the way, always grateful. I was always grateful.
Like that?
Yeah, I don't like talking about money.
I know he doesn't want to talk money. I know he believes it out, but George made $317,000 in the 15 months that he got paid for.
Okay. So here he now pulls the receipts. And if you notice, these numbers are not all the same. So I think even in Logan's situation, I'm not sure how much is being omitted. I'm not sure if this is gross or net, but there is a month here where he seemingly does make $5,000. So I'm not sure why. I mean, look, there's months of $45K, $15K. There's a $5,000 month. There's a lot of $17,000, $14,000, right? $7,000. So I'm not really sure how the came to this number, but $317,000 over the course of 18 months. I mean, that's a great income. So, but it does seem to fluctuate. And perhaps, if we're being charitable to George, perhaps there were months where there were additional expenses that he incurred. Maybe they're having to go to Puerto Rico or Florida to travel. I don't know. But Logan did pull the receipts here. So I'm sure George will get to this.
Impulsive. The work requirements consisted of about 3 days a month, 3 hours each day, traveling the world, networking, and meeting some of the coolest people ever. It comes out to about $2,300 per hour, and he also had 10% equity of the entire show.
Not you.
So 10% equity. So maybe that's why the income is so irregular. The 10% equity. Maybe he's getting some sort of net split. But 3 days a month at 3 hours a day. That's 9 hours a month. I have a hard time believing that all George was doing was spending 9 hours a month working on his podcast. Just me, myself, and I. Personally, I feel like there's some other stuff happening going on here. Any chance he had to pay for his employees with the revenue? Yes, I would assume so, Ben. That's a great point. I'm assuming George has employees, a team of his own. But to Logan's point, he's probably like, well, what does that have to do with what you're being compensated to do to be on my show, right? So I'm running a podcast. You have your own employees. You pay your employees however you want to pay employees. This is what you can pay. That would probably be Logan's response if we had to steel man Logan's position, okay?
Not Caleb, not Kevin, not Dylan. Nobody fucking called me when I got fired.
George did not get fired. He quit. I'll touch on that in a second. But after he quit, I called him frequently. I reached out. I wanted to reconcile the friendship.
So this is text messages of him reaching out repeatedly to George. Missed you yesterday, Georgie. What's up, gangster? How you living? Good.
Invited him to my birthday
party. Blah, how you doing? Just wanted to check in on you. Amazing. Glad to hear it. Thank you. Hey, gangster. You know, so this is, I don't know what the timeline is, but it definitely seems like, yeah, it's about a year ago. So when all of it kind of hit the fan. Logan apparently, you know, checking in on George here.
Party and WrestleMania and even my ranch a few weeks later. He chose not to come. He also unfollowed all the people he mentioned on Instagram, which is maybe why they didn't call him. I don't know. I can't speak for them, but he still does not follow them to this day.
And then on my birthday, you guys shot 3 episodes, so I couldn't show up.
The 2 episodes he's talking about.
Okay, so before we talk about the episodes, he talked about unfollowing people on Instagram. Put a pin in that. Put a pin in that because there's something. There's a big elephant in the room that Logan doesn't address here, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we're gonna get to it in a second, but we're gonna let Logan cook.
Not 3, were shot 4 days after George's birthday. His birthday's on January 3rd. We shot those episodes on January 7th. We were already in Vegas signing the UFC to Prime, and as we do, want to capitalize on the location and our use of time and energy and the guests in that city. George didn't come to work because he wanted to spend time with his family for his belated birthday, which I totally understand and we even praised.
One of the things that I love about George, he prioritizes his family and friends over anything.
I got my show going, and then not only was I
So that's a fair point. He's saying you guys shot on my birthday. He's like, we didn't shoot on your birthday. Maybe George didn't know that. Who knows? But that's a fair point on Logan's part.
controlled and pushed around on impulsive, but then Logan's making calls and directing my show. He told me that I couldn't take Celsius.
So this is the big one. Making calls, trying to make it seem like I wanted to control his show is absolutely ridiculous. As you can see right here, I was like, hey, we got to get you Prime because I saw him drinking our competitor.
After my dentist appointment at 3 p.m., want to go see John Vic. Bro, we got to get you Prime. Don't drink our competitor, you goose. Call me back, haha. I have to tell you something, ha 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 ha.
And he told me to call him. He was filming my reaction to tell me he took a deal with a competitor. I told him, please don't film. Like, I'd like to talk about this. I hope you're joking, by the way. The truth is, I thought it was a bad look that my best friend and co-host took a brand deal with our competitor without consulting me, asking me, giving us even a chance to match it before he signed the deal. Because the audience that he's building, at least at the time, on his own podcast was being funneled directly from the podcast that I was building with him. I said, hey, dude, I understand you need to make money. The entire text is right here that I sent him.
Okay, so let's read this text. I respect the fact that you're focusing on your platform, and I understand you have to pay the bills. I'm sorry, impulsive isn't enough for that. Just like you're looking out for yourself, I have to do the same. My business partners and I don't find it appropriate to promote one of our biggest competitors. I'm excited to watch build your podcast, and what if the deal is up and you want to come on Impulsive? The invite is open. I'd like to talk about how to move forward with the amicably and on social, because I'm sure we can avoid the lame public back and forth. Handle this in a mature way that our 8 years of friendship deserves. We support you and will drive you. Be friends first. This is just business. I'm excited to see you at WrestleMania, my birthday dinner. Okay, so, yeah, I get Logan's position here, but if you knew he was sponsoring, so it's like somebody has to be the bigger man here, right? If Logan has a company, you know your buddy's starting a podcast, you know he's going to need revenue for overhead. Do you not reach out and try and get him the deal first before Celsius even has an opportunity to? I'm sure George would have loved to go with Prime. Or maybe he wouldn't have. Maybe he wanted to stand on his own. I don't know. But I think it's a bit odd that this is being framed like we didn't try to come in the way. Now, again, George has his side of it. Logan is laying out what he feels like is reasonable. I feel like it's reasonable. If you have a company, your buddy's, and again, I don't see Celsius as a competitor, but maybe that's just me, and your buddy is doing a deal, you want them to rep your company, that's fair. But you got to also be clear and aggressive about that.
Because I did understand his position if he needed to make money, but I thought it was also a little odd because he did make $317,000 in 15 months. Regardless,
Now, I think Logan has to address, he doesn't address it in this, but amongst other, we'll get to the main thing he has to address. But I think Logan does have to address if he ever said, use your daddy's money. Because that's definitely wild for him to say. He doesn't address that, though. But if he said that, that's wild. That's wild. Ben, you do think like it's a Prime is a competition to Celsius? I've never seen it. That'd be like saying yerba mate, Guyaki is a competition to Prime, or Guyaki is a competition to Celsius. I don't know anyone that drinks Guyaki, yerba mate, and drinks Celsius. Right? Like personally, just speaking on what I'm into.
did tell him I can't have him on Impulsive if he's going to take the deal with a competitor, but if after he makes the money he wants to come back to the podcast, he's more than welcome.
Hey man, where you're at, there's no room for you to grow. They won't let you grow. They will not let you grow.
I thought saying that to Mike was a little crazy. He's grown a lot. He has 2.7 million subscribers since we met. He's a multimillionaire, a best-selling author. I tried as much as I could to help him get into those positions, and it's not entirely because of me. Mike is a phenom in his own right, and he capitalized on the platform that I gave him, which is awesome. Just like George is doing now. But if that's not growth, like what is? In fact, I think people forget, like I praised George for starting a podcast like a lot.
Georgie started his own podcast. I think it's a great idea. I always love when my co-hosts venture out and do their own things. Congratulations. It's awesome, guys. Check out his podcast.
And also saying they won't let you grow was a little hurtful because I thought at least I helped Mike do some of the things that he did, and I even encouraged him to start his own podcast.
I think you should take a page out of Georgie's book and start a show of your own.
There's no greater feeling than watching people you love succeed. I try to give people around me a platform, and if they capitalize on it, fantastic. Mike and George did. And George will even tell you this off camera. I encouraged him to pursue media and comedy since 2015. I really believe in the kid, and I still do. There's a lot more. I'm not going to get into it, but this isn't to say, by the way, that I didn't f up along the way. I did. I should not have mocked his beliefs. I apologize for that. I should have stuck up for him with Bobby Lee, and I definitely should have had his back more like a friend. There's a lot of things I would have done differently, but here we are. It saddens me that our story has unfolded this way. I wish him nothing but health, wealth, happiness, all the success that he wants, and I hope that one day we can sit down and have a relationship and a conversation.
So, outside of, kind of the little bro language of stick up for the kid and that kind of stuff, outside of that, I think that the father get the money from your father, that needed to be addressed. That's a wild thing to say. Maybe he said in the heat of the moment. Was there ever a dry spell where they weren't making money because it wasn't generating or because whatever, you guys weren't shooting? I don't know. Was there ever a moment like that? And the last thing is he conceded that he didn't stick up for him with Bobby. That is the biggest thing of this all, is if what he said about Bobby is true, that was completely mishandled. And to me, outside of the business relationship, which you're going to have disagreements in business, but outside of a business relationship, that is the most egregious part of this whole conversation. The Bobby Lee is a straight up violation. What he did to George, in my opinion, I've said it before, is SA. George used similar language. To not check Bobby Lee and then to throw George out to dry, massive violation. And then to make George apologize. That to me is what should have been addressed. Logan addressed the business stuff. And again, that you could have business disagreements. That's on some bros. You have to protect your people. You got to protect your culture, your work culture, your people. And he didn't really get into that. He just said he could have stuck up for him. I wish he would have got more into that. And I wish he would have addressed the father thing. So anyway, Logan responds. I'm guessing they're going to have a conversation. I think ultimately these brothers need to have a conversation. They need to hash it out. I think maybe it doesn't need to be content. With Mike, it was content. And some of it kind of, felt very personal. But I think it'll be good, right? I think it'll be good. Now, to be fair to George, I don't know where George was at in his walk when he started working on stuff with Logan. Logan obviously helped him out a lot. I think George would concede that and say, yeah, he has helped me out a lot. It's just sometimes when people help you out, there tends to remain this little bro energy, and there tends to remain a need to control stuff. And that's definitely how George painted Logan. So I'm glad Logan responded. I hope these two have a conversation and hash it out. I think that clearly, this wasn't handled above par. And some of this definitely feels a bit gaslighty from Logan, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. So George unfollowing people was probably the very people that he felt like didn't stick up for him and ride with him during the Bobby Lee situation. And I think that is the biggest strike in all this. That the way that had George looking to me was the most egregious. And I would understand why he unfollowed a bunch of people. So those are my thoughts on it. I want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think? Is this too much? Are we airing out too much in content? I mean, it's great content. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's great content. But is it just, Because listen, there's been people in my life that I've been friendly with, definitely not as close as these two, but people in my life I've been friendly with that it almost escalated. And so sometimes it did escalate to a place of content and that kind of stuff that I have just chose to remain quiet about. And that probably was the better thing to do, even though I really wanted to respond directly. And so it's a tricky situation, man, because it's interesting. Like, it's a good conversation. The flip side is some of this stuff can make stuff more murky. Some of the stuff you might say in the moment, you may not mean it. You might want to take it back. It just becomes complicated, So anyway, I'd love to hear from you guys, though. Let me know what you guys think about it. Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. Comment down below and let me know what you think. And be sure to check out this video that YouTube is recommending just for you. Let me know if they nailed it. All right? I'll see you over there. Peace.